we must elect conservative people who understand the proper role of government and understand money. I think the most important thing, if I were to want to impose another law, which I am not, but if I were, I would probably put a requirement on that people couldn't run for office unless they understood economics, supply and demand. And if our legislators try to balance a budget without understanding supply and demand and the proper role of government, it's impossible to do. So we have got to cut. We have got to cut and spend less. Now that's extremely difficult to do, so on the other hand we encourage business, we encourage the economy. And that is the more realistic approach, because people do, and it's pretty much a bipartisan agreement that everyone needs jobs and or a business. I have to include that because not everybody wants a job. Everyone needs a way to make a living. But back to the last question, specific regulations, without addressing the specifics, we have got to make Arizona more business friendly. I believe that we could have gotten out of the recession very, very quickly if we had put a moratorium on all regulations on new ventures. Entrepreneurs who will put their heart and soul and their life savings and everything they can borrow into an idea. Some of them work and some of them don't. But every time you start a new venture, like what I mentioned with my sister and her book sales, government comes along and stamps on it and crushes it into the ground. I was in Santan Valley just on Saturday. Somebody let me know of this. You may have read it in the newspaper. It was a local issue where the two chambers of commerce were fighting, and this group of basically outside vendors had been started. They took an old cotton gin, I think it was, and opened it up and said, come start your business here. And there was about 40 new ventures that started up, plus others that had been started looking for a place to operate the business. And according to the newspaper article, which they found out through Freedom of Information, the head of one of the chambers of commerce actually complained about this group and shut them down because they were in the wrong zoning. Now the reality of it is all the zoning in Santan Valley is all, correct me if I'm wrong, C1. In order to have outside displays, you have to have C3. This group was not C3. They wanted to do some outside displays, and so they were being shut down through Pinal County. It all came out, and things hopefully are better, and they're pointing out the contradiction is the feed store. We were down in a parking lot, and there's all these vendors with their tents and everybody happy and conducting business, and the sheriff deputies were driving through and threatening to shut us down because they kept getting phone calls and complaints, shut them down, shut them down. And there was the big pet store with outside storage of hay in the same zoning. So, you know, these rules and regulations are used as a stick. Boy, I went way far afield from that question, didn't I? But we've got to get government in control. But no, my point there, I am on point. We have to stimulate small business. We have to allow entrepreneurs, and our state would explode if we could put a moratorium on all regulation. Now that's not going to happen. That's a radical idea. Although I have thought of putting into statute certain triggers that if our economy collapsed, if our banking system collapsed something similar to 2008, it would automatically trigger a serious moratorium, which would allow freedom for a period of time. Can we get that done, and what do we need to do? But the reform we have to have is making Arizona more business friendly, which is a very complex thing to do, but must be done, along with tax reform and reduced spending, which is much more difficult.